welcome to Top 10 Thursdays on Big Train TV. I'm your host, Alex Strain, and I want to remind you that this week's episode is brought to you by the Dandy Walker Alliance, a proud partner of Big Train Baseball. Visit dandy-walker.org to learn more. This week's episode is the penultimate one in our series, counting down the top 10 greatest games in Bethesda Big Train history, clocking in at number 2 on our list. The game took place on July 31st, 2019, and pitted the Bethesda Big Train against the Silver Spring-Takoma Thunderbolts at Shirley Povich Field in what was Game 3 of that season's Cal Ripken League Championship Series. I was a member of last summer's broadcast intern team, and as a result, you're going to see a little bit more of me in this episode than perhaps you've been accustomed to in recent weeks, as I'll be sharing my memories and insight from that season alongside our guests. Those guests include my former broadcast partner Shaun Salehi, former Big Train writing intern Devin Stubbs, Big Train manager Sal Colangelo, as well as former Big Train players Ryan Okuda, Chase Lee, Jacob Southern, and Matt Thomas. It's an action-packed episode looking into one of the most memorable games in franchise history, so let's get started. The 2019 regular season saw the Bethesda Big Train cement their place atop the Cal Ripken League standings, finishing with a stellar 31-7 record and locking up the number 1 seed in the postseason tournament by a wide margin. The team was robust, confident, and loaded with good players who most importantly enjoyed playing with one another.
Granted, during the regular season, I feel like nobody else could get on Big Train's level. I feel like we were just consistently winning. Like we lost maybe 1 or 2, but then we would immediately come back and have another couple winning game streak.
I think it was just like everybody on the team we were one big unit. It wasn't like different groups of 5 guys that hung out together. Everybody loved each other on that team. We didn't have like cliques or anything. So we all wanted to succeed for the person next to us.
Honestly, when you look at that ball club, the pitching was nasty. The lineup was really good. And not in the ways that, you see baseball a lot today get all of the hype with home runs and stuff like that. There weren't a lot of home run hitters. You had Jacob Southern who could hit, a ball 500 feet, it felt like. But Kobe Cotto, Matt Thomas, Drew Hamrock, Christian Jane, Gio Diaz, Keith Torres, all these guys, like they're hitting for average. Like they're getting on base. They're stealing bags. And I think that's probably the number one thing that when you and I'm sure talk about the season every time we get together is how much this team ran. I mean, they ended up running the most out of any team in Cal Ripken League history and stole more bags than any team in Cal Ripken League history, with Gio breaking the individual record. So, I mean, I think it was just a lot of small ball, but they knew how to win baseball games.
The first round of the postseason pitted the Big Train against the Alexandria Aces, and Bethesda quickly dispatched of that opponent in a 2-game sweep, but not before emotions ran high in Game 2, which announced Bethesda's dominance to the rest of the league.
When we were in Alexandria, I think we beat them by a touchdown or 3 touchdowns. That's what it was. We beat them by about like 20 runs or so, I think. And I just remember being there, and it was a very intense environment between the fans, the officials, and the players. But I think that was exciting. We really I don't want to say beat them into the ground, but we really, I guess, asserted our dominance. And I think that's when most of the people realized that Big Train was there to win, and they weren't necessarily there to joke around. They were really there to take that title again.
The biggest thing with that series was gaining momentum going into the championship series probably, and I think we did exactly that. I think we won – I don't remember the first game a whole lot, but I know the second game we won like 24-2 or something like that, and I think that was kind of when we felt like we were like unstoppable. There wasn't really a whole lot of teams that could beat us regardless of who was on the mound or how we felt that day, but I do remember getting hit intentionally and everybody getting chirpy and all that stuff. But that's all baseball is fun.
After taking care of business with Alexandria, the Big Train headed into the championship series against the Silver Spring-Takoma Thunderbolts, a final that wasn't unexpected.
I think it made the most sense. I mean, that was the team that gave the Big Train the most run for its money during the regular season. I think from a team perspective on their end, they were kind of the most complete team in terms of offense. They had a lot of solid bats in the lineup. Lucas Donlin comes to mind. And then you have decent pitching as well. And so there was always a pretty good matchup when the two teams faced off against each other. It didn't always end up reflecting that on the final score, but it was always usually a tightly contested ball game, at least at some point during those 9 innings. And I think if you were going to pick a team that you would want to see the Big Train face, it would have to be the T-Bolts in that final series, because you knew it was going to be the best matchup of the two best teams in the league.
In previous weeks of this program, we've talked about the Baltimore Redbirds, who really served to be the Bethesda Big Train's biggest rival over the 2010s decade in the Cal Ripken League. But the Baltimore Redbirds folded before the 2019 season, and really, it was the Silver Spring Thunderbolts that had stepped in to that role. They were the team that was the closest mirror to the Big Train. They had the most passionate fan base outside of Bethesda, and the most professional stadium and operation outside of Bethesda. And on the field, the talent was pretty similar. The Big Train had the edge throughout the regular season and finished with the better record. But if you wanted an exciting matchup, this was going to be the final that you wanted. And it was the final we got.
My personal opinion, scrappy. They weren't going to have anyone on the mound that was going to beat you and really cause you to really struggle. But Doug did a good job. He gets his guys pumped up. And anytime the Silver Spring and Bethesda plays, it's a rivalry. It's always been a rivalry before we started the Cal Ripken League. I think in the last 6 or 8 years, I think they beat us once in the last 6 or 8 years. So every time, we get on the field, it's going to be competitive.
Game 1 of the series was a stunning defeat for Bethesda, a 9-0 loss at Shirley Povich Field. With their backs to the wall in Silver Spring, the Big Train answered with a 6-3 victory to even the series, sending it back to Bethesda for Game 3 with everything on the line. Sudden death, winner takes the championship. Despite the stakes, many observers felt confident.
So riding into Game 3, I think the confidence level was high, because when you go into another team's ballpark and you snatch away what was probably their best opportunity at stealing the championship away from a team that was the front runner for the title the entire season, you now have your little bit of your mojo back, and you feel confident, okay, we're back in our ballpark, it's win or go home. And, you had been to that ballpark so many times before with the same expectations, and I don't think you thought anything different was going to happen that night.
Looking back on it, I think I kind of went in with a cautiously optimistic attitude. I was excited. I was rooting for the Big Train. I obviously wanted them to win. But as soon as the game started, it kind of felt like it was off a little bit. I mean, in the very in the top of the first, they scored 3 runs.
Indeed, the T-Bolts came ready to play in Game 3. In the first inning, the team jumped all over Big Train starter Anthony Piccolino, and Bethesda knew it was time to make a change, inserting ace Ryan Okuda in the first inning. Okuda did a good job of mopping up the inning and limiting the damage to just 3 runs, and from there, Okuda settled in.
We pick in there, and he, it's a long season, especially since it's spring into the summer. So we were feeling confident, and then I don't even know if I was supposed to throw, but because I had thrown a few days before, but I just knew I was going to go in and just do what I could, throw as many innings as I could. The biggest thing I think was getting out of that first inning, because I think we had first and second, and they already scored a run with nobody out. So that was just the biggest thing, was getting out of that inning and then settling in. Yeah.
Okuda's outing proved to be huge for the Big Train, giving Bethesda 6 innings with just 1 additional run allowed. It was a pivotal performance and exactly what Bethesda needed from a pitcher who meant as much to the team as Ryan Okuda.
Ryan Okuda, I mean, you think of Chase Lee clearly as the guy, right? He was the most strikeouts in the league. He had an insane ERA, but he was the closer. If you had to pick who the horse was in terms of the starting rotation, you could argue maybe Dalton Ponce, but I think it was definitely Ryan Okuda in terms of who Sal Colangelo relied on the most throughout the regular season. And he was a dog for the Big Train all of last season out of Virginia Tech. And his importance, I mean, it can't be understated or overstated, rather, just how much he meant to this ball club.
The other thing to note about Okuda that summer was really that he had an immense amount of experience against the T-Bolts. His first 3 starts that summer were against Silver Spring, and he was dominant in almost all of them. So it wasn't just you were bringing a pitcher in who had been successful all year long, but one who had particular success against that opponent. And after the shaky beginning for Piccolino, once Okuda came in, it really just felt like a safety blanket that everything was going to be okay for at least 6 innings, and it was up to the big train bats to do the work. And indeed, Okuda did his half. The bats, on the other hand, were more questionable. On the other side, the big train bats were feeble through 7 innings against Silver Spring starter Alex Mykett. Mykett didn't allow a run over his 6 2/3 innings, and after 7 frames, the score sat at 4-0 Silver Spring. It was a surprising performance from a Silver Spring team that had struggled on the bump during the season, and for Mykett especially.
What was wild about Mykett is the fact that, like you said, he didn't have a great season starting on the bump for the T-Bolts, but he had a really good showing the previous outing in the playoffs against the DC Grays. So he was coming in hot, riding in a good game in the postseason, but you don't know whether or not that will transfer over into his next appearance. And it ended up working. I mean, I'm looking at my scorebook, and the first runner he ended up allowing getting on base was a hit by pitch to Drew Hamrock, and that was in the 2nd inning. And then a walk to Keith Torres, a walk to Christian Jane, but that's 3 base runners in 3 innings. Like, there's not a whole lot of offense going for the big train, and no hits through all of this time. So he is cruising through the best lineup in the entire Cal Ripken League. And if you're the T-Bolts, you certainly have to be feeling happy about this because you're riding this guy and he's cruising. There's no need for you to take him out. And at that point in the ball game, the midway point, he was doing great. And he's doing all of this without striking anybody out. He didn't end up striking somebody out until the 4th inning. He got 2 Ks in that inning. But again, it was just pitching to contact, a lot of, weak ground balls, flyouts, just stuff like that wasn't going wasn't finding open grass at Shirley Povich Field. It felt like the world was against the big train bats because they just could not find a way to get on base.
Well, you got to tip your hat to that guy. I mean, he actually was throwing the ball pretty well. He was keeping us off balance, and he was working ahead, throwing strikes. And the young man threw well. Just thankful they left him in there longer than they should. But he threw very well. You got to tip your hat to him. He kept us at bay. I would have never guessed he would have done that, and he did. So we had to make adjustments. We had to do the little things to kind of get it going.
After Okuda exited the game, Bethesda turned to reliever Greer Holston out of the pen, and he helped put up zeros in the top of the 7th and top of the 8th, giving the big train a chance to rally, a performance in line with Holston's role on the team.
What made Greer really, really special was that he's an intimidating guy. He's 6'5", 6'6", whatever he is, and he throws hard. And I think part of what made him good was he was able to pound his fastball to both sides of the plate, and that's kind of what we pitched off of. We would establish his fastball and then use his slider later in the day.
Ryan is a lefty, so he's got to pound the corners, pick at the plate. And then Greer had a really good fastball. They just threw at the top of the zone. So it was 2 completely different looks. And so when you see, a lefty with, picking at the plate with a splitter, and then you see a really high-spin fastball at the top of the zone, it's going to be tough to compete, especially when you saw Okuda for 6-7 innings.
Entering the bottom of the 8th inning, Bethesda's chances were looking slim. They needed at least 4 runs to tie the game before recording 6 outs. But thankfully, the T-Bolts bullpen was creaky. 2 runners got aboard to lead off the inning, and Matt Thomas strode to the plate. The right hitter at the right time.
Matt Thomas really seemed like a leader on the team. I remember that distinctly. It seems like the big leader on the team was Southern, but then Jacob Southern, he got injured and then he had to go back to school. So I feel like Matt Thomas really he stepped up and he had team morale. He always boosted it. He kind of just kept everybody in high spirits, and he always performed out on the field. So I feel like he was a natural selection in order to come up and really just be that person that everyone really just believed in and hoped for.
You're entering the final potential meat of your order that's going to come up in 2019. You have, Matt Thomas, Kobe Cotto, like Drew Hamrock. These guys have been getting on base all season, and you want them up in a big situation, but they're probably not going to come back up in the ninth. So I remember the pressure was really high because you need to score a lot of runs. You're not, it's not a 2-run ball game or a 1-run ball game. You need to score 4 runs to tie this ball game up and extend it. And I just remember when the guys got on base before Matt Thomas, and then Thomas stepped up to the plate. This is a guy who had not hit a home run since high school. He had not hit a home run at William & Mary. He had not hit a home run in the Cal Ripken League. And he ended up working a great at-bat and flying a ball over the deepest part of the ballpark, over the scoreboard.
There was no point in my head when I was trying to hit a home run. Like, that's not at all what I was thinking. I remember when I was walking up to the plate, I was thinking, if I could hit a double here, 2-run score and I'm still on base and we can make this a 4-3 game and we're right back in it. But what our offense was missing that day was just like one big spark. Like, we had some base runners here and there, a couple hits, but we didn't really have anything that was going to like change the momentum of what was happening in that game. And the same pitcher was out there, and I was watching like some previous at bats. He was throwing a lot of first pitch breaking balls, but and usually if he would get it over for a strike, he would try to follow it with another one and kind of pitch backwards. Sometimes that's what you have to do with an offense like ours. Like, they weren't just going to be able to serve fastballs in there and win that game. That's just not how that one was going to go. So the first pitch I ended up taking, and it was a breaking ball right down the middle. And when he threw that pitch, I felt like I had won that at bat. And he ended up throwing another one in the second pitch, and I was kind of just sitting on it, and he left it right over the middle of the plate. And I didn't try to do too much. I just took a good swing, and it ended up, going over the fence.
The 8th inning. There's a swing and a fly ball off the bat of Thomas. This one to deep left center field, back towards the track, towards the wall. It is gone! Matt Thomas hits it out, and it is 4-3.
And he just hit the biggest home run of his life in the championship game 3. It's a 1-run ball game.
The Thomas home run changed the game in an instant. Suddenly, it was only a 1-run ball game, and the Big Train still had 6 outs to do it. Silver Spring made a pitching change, swapping in Tyler Dieball for Braden Cale. But the greatest change was the emotional impact of the moment in the stadium and on the teams.
After he hit that, the energy spiked immediately up. All the fans got so much more excited. The team really just took the energy that the T-Bolts had, and it got transposed over to them, and it really just turned the team around. The game turned around. Everybody just was up out of their seats cheering. Everybody up in the press box immediately got up and started yelling and screaming. It was an exciting time. I don't really think anybody expected it to happen, so for it to just happen out of the blue.
There are a few moments in sports where the emotional impact of a play far outweighs the material impact it has on the field. The Matt Thomas home run was one of those plays. In material terms, it really just brought the Big Train closer. They were still down and still trailing by a run. They weren't close to the finish line yet. They hadn't taken the lead yet. But in reality, it was such an incredible sea change that even in the broadcast booth where I was seated, my initial thought was, the Big Train are winning this game. They didn't even have anyone on base. They were still trailing by a run. But the moment it happened, everything changed. The momentum, the feel in the stadium, it was the spark the Big Train needed. It was just one of those singular moments that stands out in my young broadcasting career as among the greatest plays I've ever had the opportunity to call. And the energy in Shirley Povich Field that night was electric. The Big Train had been given new life, and they quickly seized on it. Drew Hamrock got aboard, stole 2 bases, but then was thrown out at the plate on a Keith Torres ground ball. With 2 outs and a runner on, Darius Foster and Kate Hunter both walked to load the bases, bringing Gio Diaz up to the plate for the biggest at-bat of the season. Diaz would not waste it. Bases loaded, 2 outs. 1-1 swing and a line drive, right back up the middle. 1 run scores, being waved around third. He's coming to the plate. He will score. Gio Diaz gets it done. 5-4 Bethesda.
And this is a guy who has had incredible plate discipline all season. a guy who's been able to get a lot of base hits, and he's been able to perform in clutch situations. This isn't quite one of them, but I mean, he was the All-Star Game MVP. This is a guy who's shown up game after game after game for Sal Colangelo in his squad. And so there's really nobody else, I think, that you would want up there in that situation to give the big train the lead or just get them back in this ball game than Gio Diaz. And he ends up sending one right back up the middle of seeing eye single.
You know, Gio the other day, I still remember, hey, coach, I got this. I'm going to hit the ball right up the 4-hole, right up the middle. We're going to drive this run in. That was before he went to the plate, and he did.
The big train now had the lead, but they weren't done. Christian Jane would double to pad the advantage and give Bethesda a 9-4 edge heading into the ninth, which meant it was time for the big train's feared closer, Chase Lee, to enter.
His slider is one of the nastiest pitches I've ever seen in person. I remember my favorite place to sit all season was at Silver Spring Takoma Park because we were situated right behind home plate underneath the bleachers. So we could see every pitch move, whether it was, a slider, just any breaking ball, or a two-seam fastball, and we could see the movement of every pitch in a way that you really don't get a chance to see as a fan in the stands or as a broadcaster in the press box. And after seeing Chase Lee's slider for the first time behind home plate, I mean, you realize very quickly that there's no way I can hit it, and none of these guys who are actually playing college baseball can hit it, so it has to be insane. And, I mean, it was nasty. You knew that he was going to go to it. The batter knew that he was going to go to it if it was an 0-2 count, 1-2 count, because there weren't many 2-2 counts with Chase Lee. And there's a reason he led the league in strikeouts, man. I mean, it was an untouchable pitch, and he was just an incredible presence to have in the back end of that bullpen, almost like a Mariano Rivera. If you knew if he was coming in, the game was usually wrapped up.
As soon as Chase Lee would ever get on that mound, I knew that I was going home. Didn't matter what inning, didn't matter what time of the game. I was like, oh, Chase Lee's here. Let me pack up my stuff. I'm going home early tonight. And he always performed as well. I think he was one of the most exciting pitchers to watch because as soon as he would wind up, as soon as you would see that, the ball would already be in the glove.
Lee entered, and he let the pitching do the rest, which meant a 6-4 Big Train victory and a fourth consecutive Cal Ripken League championship. And then the celebration was on.
0-2 count. Swing and a miss! And it's over! The Bethesda Big Train are the 2019 Cal Ripken Collegiate Baseball League champions.
I'd say, as soon as Matt hit the home run, you just kind of felt the energy change, I guess, in the whole stadium. You kind of had a feeling we were going to take the lead there. And, it had been a slow day, so I'd been sitting around a whole lot, just hanging out with the guys, enjoying the last day. And then, towards the eighth inning, we started, getting some hits together. And then Matt hits the home run. And then, I laced my cleats up, and I knew at that time, we were going to take the lead. And then I was going to at least get a chance to throw. I look back at like my first outing of that summer. We played the T-Bolts, and I gave up, back-to-back doubles, and kind of was reminiscing on that before I went in. And then once I got the ball and got on the mound, I kind of realized that that wasn't going to happen again. I was just going to flip some sliders in and then enjoy the celebration, let the defense behind us work.
It just erupted. Everybody in the stadium erupted. I mean, of course, besides the Thunderbolt fans. Everybody erupted. There was a huge dog pile on the field. Players, coaches, the athletic trainers, all of us up in the press box, we were all just yelling, excited. We did the big train choo-choo sound. It was just very exciting. And then going down, and when all the families of the players, all the host families, everybody came out at the field, everybody was taking pictures with the trophy, with each other, with all of the players. It was just insane. It just seems like something changed in the bottom or in the eighth inning, and it really just stuck through. The energy stuck through for the rest of the night. I was in a daze the rest of the night driving home, and I got home that night, and I was just like, wow, that really happened. I got to be a part of that as a writer and as an intern for Big Train. I can say that I was a part of that.
I think the thing that I felt the most was we had just won a championship, but like now it was kind of over. Like we had worked all summer and been together all summer, and I think nobody was really ready to like leave. Our bodies might have been tired, and it'd been a long summer of baseball, but I definitely wasn't ready for Chase to go back to Alabama and for Greer to go back to Ole Miss and all those St. Mary's boys to go back across the country to California. So I think I was definitely disappointed that it was over, but what a great way to end it. It really couldn't have been any better than that.
That's it for this week's edition of Top 10 Thursdays on Big Train TV. I want to thank each one of our guests for joining us and sharing their insight, as well as to Bon Satufa for putting together the video clips we were able to show you in this episode. Next week, we'll be moving on to game number 1 on our countdown of the greatest games in Bethesda Big Train history, and it took place in 2011. It's an exciting episode, and you won't want to miss it, so be sure to tune in next Thursday at 7 p.m., and we'll see you then.
1 in 10,000 children are born with a brain malformation known as Dandy-Walker syndrome. Dandy-Walker can cause enlargement of the skull, lack of muscle control, and other developmental challenges. More research is needed, but we do know that early therapy helps many live healthier, fuller lives. 1 in 10,000 may not seem like a lot unless your child is the one. Learn more, find help, and help others. Visit dandy-walker.org.